Hi, my name is Clare and I'm the mother of 3 teenagers with FASD.
I'm Jessica, a PhD researcher specialising in educational interventions for children with FASD.
And together we are the hosts of Spotlight on FASD, the UK's first podcast dedicated to shining a spotlight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders.
FASD is a condition caused by prenatal alcohol exposure that affects hundreds of thousands of children across the UK.
And we're here to bring these conversations out of the shadows and make sure that no one living with FASD feels alone. Hi and welcome back to another episode of Spotlight on FASD. As promised in a previous episode in our education season, we said that we were going to, episode 4, we said that we were going to do a quick little episode. I'm going to try not to talk as much during this episode. We're going to do a quick little episode about what it looks like when everything appears to be fine in school, but what may be labelled as behaviours, the challenging behaviours, which are symptoms, are exploding or unravelling at home or the minute they're out of the school door, out of the school gates. Because I think this is something that I have come across so many times working with, especially working with CAMHS professionals, and I know CAMHS can often get a bad rap, but there's so many CAMHS clinicians that I've spoken to who it is equally as frustrating for them when they're saying, you know, I've got mum or dad or a carer saying that they cannot manage what is happening at home and it is because of school, but school is saying, hey, that sounds like a different child.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine all day.
Educational psychologists as well, when I've spoken to educational psychologists who've gone into school and done observations and have written reports and left saying, well, you know, there was a few little things that would suggest anxiety, like, you know, rocking or chewing on the jumper sleeve or something like that, but nothing that in any way matches up with what the parents are saying are happening back home. And that's really important, especially if there's no diagnosis as well and you still don't know what you're dealing with.
And I think to be fair to the teachers, to education professionals, they are telling the truth, because that's all they can do. They can only report back what they are dealing with during that school day, during the playtimes, lunch breaks, and they're not dealing with those difficult situations or those extreme behaviours. But I think where it becomes a problem, as I know from a CAMHS professional point of view, a few of them I was speaking to not very long ago, they were saying that they felt they totally stuck between two camps because they absolutely knew that it was the school day that was causing all of this difficulty, but that the child was like this master of survival, containing it all until they got home, but school just would not have it that it was even anything to do with them. So I think what I would love to get out of this episode, that if there are any teachers, education professionals listening to this now where, you know, the next time, because you will come across that situation for every different diagnosis, every different situation where a child is able to mask, and we know that girls are better at masking and do it more and more often. So I think my ask of you is that the next time that happens, to accept that 99% of the time, there is absolutely no way a parent or a carer is going to make up or kind of have any reason to lie about the fact that, you know, if they are saying to you that what has happened in the school day and the fact that their child has had to hold it together and cope with the sensory overload and cope with surviving a school day the way it's being delivered to them possibly with no adjustments to it, they would never make that up. You know, because it's not a very nice feeling to have to say, you know, this is going terribly wrong when we get home and I'm struggling to handle these situations. very few parents want to be having to have that conversation with any professional. So the fact that they're doing it, you've got to just take that at face value and accept that that is what's happening. And you know, if you've got a parent or a carer who's saying that, you know, this is what it is, this is why this is happening, you've got to look into that, and you've got to accept that. And I can appreciate how difficult that might be to think, right, well, what am I meant to do? Because, you know, little Tom is behaving perfectly well.
Yeah.
Or what do you want me to do? There's nothing I can do, but you need to kind of start and look at it certainly through sensory overload eyes. And you've got to work together with the family, with the carers, and any professionals involved to accept that, you know, the bulk of that child's time is during the day, midweek is spent in school. So it stands to reason that is why a lot of that is spilling out when they get out of school.
But take a step back from that, there's challenging behaviours coming out at home at the end of the school day that the parents, the carers are struggling to cope with, or are coping with, but they're becoming, you know, overwhelming or unmanageable, or you're simply seeing they are manageable, and you're simply seeing your child in distress at the end of the school day, like something has, you know, something's spilling out. But we go back earlier in the day and they've been fine all day in school. Now what has happened now, or generally speaking at least, is when they've been faced with tasks and requests as part of the school day through those traditional education approaches that they can't cope with, the sensory that we've talked about before, sensory overload in the classroom, they've been overstimulated, they've been overwhelmed, they're dysregulated, whatever it is that has happened, they're masking. So they're really, really struggling, and they've just been able to put on this front of, nope, fine, everything's fine. And as Claire described it, they're masters of disguise. They, you know, unless you really, really, really have a thorough understanding of FASD, you probably wouldn't see it. And it's that needs addressing. So it's that moment when they're masking, whatever it is, you need to find the moment when they're really not coping and they are masking, and put those supports in place. And that's really, really hard, because you don't necessarily know what it is that they need support with. You can't, it's hard to find out what part of the day they're struggling with that's causing the masking, that's causing everything to bubble up and the behaviours at home. And I've seen this fantastic resource that I know some parents have used that helps children visualise what's going on. And it's a little picture, it's a diagram of a volcano. And it's like, it's bubbling up, it's bubbling, and it's simmering, and it's simmering, and it's simmering. And as soon as they're at home in their safe place where they can relax, and I use the word relax in a very different way here than, you know, hot bubble bath with some candles. As soon as they are able to release those masks, the volcano erupts, and the pressure of trying to cope has gone completely, because they just can't do it anymore. But that's been simmering all day, and all of these things, playtime, lunchtime, the social interaction with other children in the playground, that's caused bother, so that's made it simmer that little bit more, and it's just been building and building and building. But if you can't see that, and you're not aware of that, and you don't know about FASD, and the child doesn't have a diagnosis, and you don't know what to be looking for that, how do you put something, you know, we understand that this can be an impossible situation for many people. So what we're trying to do is just back up the parents and carers, really. As Claire said, if they're telling you that that's happening.
I think a very, very simple but very powerful thing that you could do is, if you are you find yourself in that situation as an education professional, and you've got a parent or a carer saying, you know, this is what's happening at home, this is what's happening the minute we get to the car, and it's going on for 2 hours after school. Even if in the first instance you respond with something like, oh, right, we need to get to the bottom of this then.
Yes.
Rather than,
yeah,
I can't even imagine that, because she is absolutely good as gold in school. Yeah, that doesn't even sound like her. I can't imagine that, because you are instinctively trying to reassure that parent or that carer, which is a lovely, compassionate, nurturing thing to do. However, it has the total opposite impact, and because that parent or carer is
conditional, doesn't it, in a way? Yeah.
Because they're already at a point where they're thinking, what is happening? What am I doing wrong? If you know, because I'm not getting any phone calls from school, this isn't happening in school. What am I doing wrong that it's happening at home? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a parent and a caregiver, they understand. They're the expert of that child normally. There will be exceptions to the rule, but normally they are. And you can kind of sniff out, or a conversation might happen at bath time where it could be that the boy that sits opposite constantly rocks on his chair or bangs, or there is, you know, swinging double doors outside of the classroom door and they're banging. You know, they will let you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you would just be, I always say this, but parents and carers who are coming to you to say, look, this is what's happening, what can we do? They are absolutely your treasures as professionals. Use their expertise, use their suggestions, because if you engage with them positively and just say, right, what do we do? What do we do? Chances are you will be, because if they've reached the point where they're coming to you to say, this is what's going on, chances are the next thing that's about to come out of their mouths is, if you try this, I think this will happen.
Their toolbox, their entire toolkit will come out of their mouth and be handed over. Yeah.
So, you know, it's like we need to work a little bit better together. And, you know, just to point out the fact that where you think you are probably reassuring a parent and saying, they're absolutely brilliant in school, I absolutely can't understand this. What an end of their tether parent he is there is, well, that's just clearly something you're doing wrong, because I cope with 29 of the kids and yours and there's no problem.
Yeah.
And that's not what you're saying, but that's what they're hearing. Yeah, so, you know, you might be thinking, oh, that sounds a bit odd, but even if you can just greet it with, right, what do we do? Mm-hmm. What do we need to look at? Have you got any ideas? And I would be amazed if they didn't already say, well, I was thinking, if you do this, move this, ask them to do this, give them this job, and they will be able to help you navigate that. Because ultimately, if they, you know, they will have narrowed everything else down, they will have done everything with the routine at home, and if they have absolutely know that it's school that's causing this, then they will have come up with lots of different things that you can do differently in school, because they're the ones who are having to deal with it. And ultimately, nobody wants their child to suffer like that. Nobody wants their child to have survived a school day to the point where they break down at the end of it. That is so exhausting. It impacts on then what they will eat at dinner time. That will then impact on how they will sleep. And then everything just gets more and more and more difficult. And that is when we get disengagement with education, because a child is just too exhausted to engage.
And it's going to have a knock-on effect throughout the week. And, you know, if they've not eaten very well, they might not sleep anyway. We've spoken about that in previous episodes. But if they've not eaten properly, their sleep will be impacted. If their sleep's impacted, getting up to go to school the next day is going to be impacted. If you're late to school and you've got 29 other children going, oh, where have you been? It's 11 o'clock. That's going to impact that day. And it rolls on throughout the week. And, you know, it's the only thing I think education professionals can do here is, like you say, Claire, respond with, what do I do? And then start to gather the data. Now, that sounds very scientific actually, but what I mean by that is gather all the information you can from the parents, because they are the expert in that child. And then start gathering, you know, if FASD is mentioned, gather all the information that you can about FASD. Then start observing the child, gather all the information that you can. Like, can you see, start observing that, you know, do they get a little bit more fidgety as we're in the run up to lunch? Is that, do we know if that's because they're hungry, or is that because they're anxious? Or is that because lunchtime is hugely problematic? And we're not saying this, and we don't say any of what we share in these podcasts as trying to burden anyone or add to workload. You know, we know how unbelievably stressed and pressured and, you know, education professionals, their workload is sky high. We know that. But it's just in the back of your mind. It doesn't even need to be consciously in the back of your mind, just one eye on little Tom in the corner, whose mum's having a really hard time when he gets home. And it's, you know, oh, I've actually noticed that he gets quite unsettled right before lunchtime. Okay, let's explore that further.
I can give you a shortcut to the data. So I love how Jessica is such an academic. Like, gather the data. I'm like, right, do you want to have a look inside my head? Because that's where it all is. But there is your shortcut to the data, because I'm telling you now, as a teacher, education professional, whatever role you play, if you have a meaningful conversation with a parent or a carer and you just say, right, where should I look? Where should I start looking? What do you think? What do you think could be happening in the school day? You will be presented with as much data as you can possibly cope with. That, you know, there isn't a parent or a carer who wouldn't say, actually, will you find out what happens at lunchtime? Will you have a look at what happens at break time? When they're told to sit quietly, I think this could be happening. They will be your navigator and your shortcuts, because you know, as you would love to have the luxury to think, right, I'm just going to observe him for a little minute, but you've just got everything else going on.
It's not possible to take that time.
So that's why parents and carers, especially the ones who are coming to you and being proactive and like, we need to sort this out, use their knowledge. They will want to do anything in their power to help you help them and help their child. You know, so it's certainly not a criticism. It's just, but it happens over and over and over again, and it is a big problem.
And if you can get like 5-10 minutes at the end of the school day or something, when everybody's left, when this parent has come to you to have this conversation in the first place, you know, those proactive parents, like, really, really valuable here, as Claire said. But bring them in. Say, right, that's the seat that they sit in. That door's usually open. This is where we go to pick up the books. You know, just a quick lay of the land. The parent might word vomit on the spot. They might go away and come back and be like, right, okay, that's a problem. Can we try this seat? Because now I've seen the lighting, I've seen that's a problem. It'll be reflecting off that glass there. They're way too close to that open door over there. If that's where the children are all going to pick their books up from, they've got to walk around my child, which is going to disturb them. And that, you know, will very, very quickly start building that picture, as Claire said. And it's piecing the jigsaw together, because it's whilst they're coping with school, whilst they're fine in school, that it's a very, very quick, steep downward spiral to disengagement with education as they get older and are going through the years in school, and whilst they're coping and managing at this stage, once it starts spilling out into home, it's, you know, you're at the top of that spiral.
I think something that I always remember is when you do first aid training, if there's ever been any kind of an accident, you are always told, you know, you make your way to the person who is making the least noise.
Yeah.
Not moving. They are your priority, not the person who's screaming, because you know that they are breathing and they are alive. You go to the person who isn't. And, you know, we talk about fight, flight, freeze, and we know that our children hover in it, above it, or just about into it all the time. And what you might find, this child who is super pleasing, who will accommodate, who just really requires barely any input and is just under the radar. But if you know anything about their background that would make you think, I can't believe how well behaved they are, that is terrifying, because they are in freeze. Like, their body is coming as close to kind of fake and being dead as they can, so as not
being conscious.
So and they are, and so you can imagine that level of energy and that level of strength and power, because their body wants to just shut down and die, but they're having to just, right, I need to walk that way because it's dinner time now, and I need to pick my tray up, and I need to sit down. And then, so you can imagine when they get to their safe place, they have got no control over what happens to their body after that, and they fall apart. And, you know,
it is a lack of control, and these are symptoms that we're talking about. It's not, you know, when we say behaviors and things, it's symptoms.
They're symptoms. They are symptoms. But to the naked eye, especially if there's no diagnosis in place, or there's just a question around a diagnosis, to the naked eye, what you are looking at, what you are dealing with in that moment, are very, very difficult behaviours. That's the only way you can describe them if you don't know that they are symptoms. That's, you know, in the heat of it, that's what you're dealing with. And I just think that we've had so many conversations about it. When you were just going to do a short little episode about this, just to put it to the forefront of people's minds, to the parents and carers who are living this life, you don't need to just tolerate that. Speak to your school, you know, work together with them. That is not, our children don't need to be suffering that day in, day out. It's not fair, it's barbaric, it's horrible, it's exhausting, it affects everything, and it will eventually lead to disengagement. Trust me, it will eventually lead to disengagement. And that is a place that you want to avoid at all costs. Because, you know, I thought, you know, the level of knowledge that I had and the level of effort that I was putting into my children staying engaged, it even stuns me sometimes when I realise that I haven't been able to achieve it for all of them. And it is terrifying. It's a terrifying thought, but it's actually not difficult to stop it from happening and to resolve it if it already is happening. And I think that's what I want to say. I want to say it's within your gift as teachers, as professionals. It is absolutely within your gift. If you communicate with that parent or carer, then you can stop, you can balance the scales as best as you possibly can. So I think it is something that is achievable, and it would just change the outcome of that child's educational journey and therefore their life. So it's not a criticism, it's not negative, it's just kind of saying, this is happening, it's happening to so many people. We need to just start talking about it a little bit, accept that it's a real thing, accept that there isn't a parent who's going to make that up, because why would they want to have that uncomfortable conversation if it wasn't actually happening? You know, like, you know, I'm getting kicked in the head all the way driving home from school. No one's going to want to make that up and admit to that. It is happening. So school need to accept that that's where they've been for the 6.5 hours before that. So that has inevitable that it's played a role in that spilling out of the child. So I think that's really what we wanted to get across, that it's something that we need to remember is there, and it is very real, but there are lots of things we can do about it.
Yeah, and it's a huge part of education, huge part of education, to the point where, you know, you'll have parents and carers dreading that pickup time as well, knowing what's to come, which again is you know, it's heartbreaking for the child to have to go through that and suffer that loss of control and everything else, but also for the parents. And it's you know, it's not a life that anybody wants to think that anybody's living, if there is something really simple that can be put in place. And it's a simple adjustment. It's not simple to find, it's not simple to identify, but the adjustment will be as simple as
9 times out of 10, you would probably be astonished at what it would take to tip those scales, to have a little bit more of a balance.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with FASD, if you're dealing with this brain injury, you are never going to be able to get the scales even. It's always going to be very, very difficult for a child to be able to be completely comfortable in school, because they're trying to navigate that school day without a safe person with a brain injury. So it's always going to be tricky, but there are ways that we can make it so much more manageable for them and enjoyable, that, you know, they absolutely deserve to be able to enjoy their experience and not just.
I think just to add on to that very, very quickly, I think when you find the thing that helps, if it's moving to another seat, for example, or putting some adjustments in place in terms of the work that they're trying to complete, it's part of a much bigger toolbox. Don't be fixated on that one adjustment as being the solution, because as Elsa, who we had on last week, who we spoke to not last week's episode, 2 episodes ago, she always says the only consistency with FASD is inconsistency. So be prepared to work through that toolbox, and that's another reason why building that relationship with the parent or caregiver and asking for their help, having that response of, okay, so what do we do? And when that stops working, then what should we try? And when that stops working, what would you recommend? Do we go back to plan A, or should we try and search together for plan D? And when plan D stops working, what do you suggest we do? And having that continual conversation and be ready. And if it is as simple as moving them to a different seat within the room, be ready, keep moving, keep moving. And one day it won't be the seat, it will be the light. And it won't, then another day it won't be the light, it will be the door.
And it's accepting that without, it's you know, it's accepting that it's not that child, that young person, like, they don't want those difficulties in their life. No. They're not, it's inconvenient, but they are real. They're very, very real things, and they need to be, you know, taken seriously. And apart from anything else, chances are that, you know, if this is happening to a child and they're masking and then they're coming home from school and falling apart, as the week goes on, you are getting, you know, you might be able to sit back and think, actually, yeah, by like a Wednesday, Thursday, you know, yeah, they're nowhere near the most difficult child in the class, but they're struggling, the work takes a dip that you can see, because they're going to be absolutely exhausted. If you think, like, as an adult, if you imagine a situation where you have been so scared and so stressed for a full day, but you've had to just go about your business, you know how exhausted you would be that night when you got home. And to then be doing bath time, trying to relax, watching whatever you're going to watch on the television and going to bed, knowing that you have to do the same thing all over again the next day, that is absolutely exhausting. So yeah, we just wanted to put it in the forefront of your minds. You're all doing a fantastic job. I have always said this, and I'm absolutely in awe of what teachers have to juggle on their plates, what they have to have in their toolboxes. And we just want to be able to assist. That's what we want to do. Definitely not a criticism. We just want to be able to help a little bit and put our perspective onto things. So we hope that it's helped in some way. And thank you for listening, and we will speak to you again.
Do get in touch if there's anything that, you know, if we can point you in the direction of a resource or anything like that, if there's anything that we can do to support it that bit further. do get in touch.